Education has a project called the EdTech Center, which runs a number of initiatives around distance learning and technology integration. And so a lot of the work that Crowded Learning has been doing very much aligns to the work of the EdTech Center. And so Crowded Learning has moved in as its own project within the EdTech Center, focused on the use and integration of open education resources. So very happy to have a new home and to have amazing colleagues there, many of whom you probably know. So as I said earlier in the chat, I have pasted the link for today's slides. I highly encourage you to grab them because within the slides are links to absolutely everything that we're talking about today. And I just want to mention, this is really going to be my only sort of instruction around what it means to be open, but this is an openly licensed resource. And so what that means, that this designation here as being Creative Commons licensed by means attribution. So all that means is that you have the ability to take these slides and not only use them for yourself to go back to and look at the links, but say you're presenting in 3 months on something, you have every ability to take these slides and to repurpose them and use them for something that you are presenting. And that is the spirit of open education, and that is the spirit of open licensing. I will say that within the conversation today and what I share, some of these resources are openly licensed, meaning that you do have the ability to reuse them in the ways that are defined by the license. Some of them are not openly licensed, they are free, and that means that you have the ability to use them and access them, but you can't say, for example, make copies of them and, say it's yours, for example. That, is something that you can't do. So I encourage you to grab these slides. They are for your both learning and for your future use. And so please do that. I'm not going to actually, I can hop into the chat one more time and paste those. So I'll do that there. And as Kent said in introducing me, we're going to be focusing on looking at ways to increase your ability to effectively use open education resources. And the way that we're going to do that is first sort of setting the stage for the lens that we're going to be talking about all of these resources. And that is through the eyes of both access and accessibility. I'll talk about that in a second. Then we're going to briefly look at characterizing EdTech tools, because over the past 9 months, you have been inundated with lots of sessions. I was talking to Kenneth earlier. I'm amazed and encouraged by the high attendance that we see at all of these things. But even within that, I know I'm a little overwhelmed in terms of all of the information that's flying around, all of the great goodies that in some cases are free. And so we're going to be focused on sort of characterizing all of these different tools so that we can think about what these different EdTech tools do, what purpose they serve within sort of your broader ecosystem of instruction. So how you are teaching, how are you communicating, how are you organizing things for learners, and being really strategic about, as we look at each of these resources and tools, where they fit in. And so then we're going to look at some resources that Crowded Learning has developed and maybe you're already familiar with to help you find quality open education resources in terms of content. Then look at tools that help us organize those effectively for synchronous instruction and for asynchronous instruction, and then briefly talk about some instructional strategies that you can use to really start developing routines. All of this is sort of focused on two things. One is just helping you sort of sift through all of the great things that are out there. And mainly the point of that is to help us be more strategic. Even though we've been at it for 9 months, it's been a bunch of teasers for 9 months, right? It's like, this resource is free. Now it's not free. Or, hey, we think we're going to go back into in-person classes in September, and some of you have, and then some of you are now back at remote. And so knowing that there's sort of a still uncertain future, the real goal is to think of what are the strategies that we want to use for these EdTech tools and this great free content, And think about it from the lens of what's great now if we're working remotely is going to be equally great when we're back in person, because the time that you spend now to be thoughtful about what you use, those same tools, those same routines, that same content that you create and organize for students, it's still going to be there when you're back in person, and you're all the better for it because now students have access to these things whether or not they can attend class, and whether or not you choose to continue providing a more diverse range of opportunities for learners. So, as I said, as we start this, I want to think carefully and just talk about briefly accessibility and access, because these are two things that, as you're considering the resources that you use, and you're probably already aware of that because of some of the struggles we've all had as we've transitioned, that these are really important things to consider. And this is really thinking about what's called human-centered design and making sure that what you are using with students is going to be something they can access and something they can use. So when I'm talking about access, I'm talking about just having the physical ability to actually get a resource. And that comes with having the technology, that comes with having the broadband access in order to reach things. So all of these tools that we're going to be talking about are online. Some of them are downloadable. Some of them are printable. And thinking about, what's what, we want to make sure that the resources that we're choosing are able to be accessed by learners simply by way of the devices that they have and the broadband access that they have. But we're also looking at accessibility. And as we are sort of thinking about the resources that we want to use, are these tools, is this instruction being offered in a way that learners can actually engage and can actually learn from that resource? And so we're going to look at some examples of really excellent resources that in some cases have limitations, that if someone has visual impairment or physical impairments in terms of manipulating a mouse or manipulating a touchscreen, they might not be usable. That doesn't mean we don't use them, because they're great tools. But what it does mean is we need to consider that we need to be providing a variety of options so that we are not locking any student out from being able to learn from the resources that we are providing for them. And so we're going to be sort of talking about both of these things, access and accessibility, as we look at the various resources. When we're talking about access, that really is thinking about meeting learners where they are. So what is it that you want to do? Do you want to provide learning options for students that they can learn independently? Do you want to be integrating content during your synchronous time using Zoom? And so those are your goals, and then what tools are available. And for some students, they may have limited access. For some students, they may have limitations to how they're able to engage. And so accessibility is a really key component of that. And if we've met before, I've loved being able to talk with folks in Arizona 2 years ago now. At your institute, we did a whole session on accessibility. And it's really important to be considering these things, but just as a sort of a primer of ways to think about accessibility as you are considering what is accessible and what does that mean. The National Center on Accessible Educational Materials has this great framework called POUR. And so there's 4 aspects of being accessible. And what they do with this framework is actually they take what is very complicated language in the guidelines that are provided for accessibility and really break it down and provide tools to help you understand each of these things. So perceivability means, can learners see and hear your content? Is there closed captioning? Is the color contrast that you're providing enough for somebody to see it on a screen? I'm presenting to you right now under the assumption that you are looking at this on a computer. You may be designing slide decks to present during Zoom time. Are you thinking about the fact that a learner is watching that on a mobile device? And so they're looking at it on a screen this size. So is your text size big enough for somebody to even be able to perceive what it is you are showing if they're doing it on a smaller device? So that's what this means. Operable means learners can actually interact with your content with a variety of tools. And what that means is that, we hear, oh, yeah, it's mobile friendly. But are you actually looking at that resource on a mobile device and testing it out to see, is this realistic for me to expect a learner to be operating it on a mobile device? And we are going to look at actually two examples of both of these in a moment as we look at some of the resources that are out there. So operability just comes down to, is this something that can be actually operated by learners with the devices that they have access to? So that's mixing that access and accessibility. Understandable, can learners understand your content and enjoy a predictable experience? So part of this is plain language. Are you writing instructions and providing guidance for learners in ways that they are going to be able to use it? So when we're looking at open education resources, and some of the tools that I'm going to share, it's, hey, you can grab a resource from here and you can grab a resource from here. And that's great. So now you have two resources that give learners options, but are you providing enough guidance for students to understand what that resource is, what is expected of them in using that resource, and how are they going to operate it? So plain language instructions is something that's really important, but then again, providing consistent experiences for your learners. And so one of the things we're going to talk about is being strategic and being selective about the things that you want to be using with learners, because what we sort of encourage is pick a tool, get students comfortable with that tool or a content resource, help them get comfortable with that one resource, and then you start adding on. And not just saying, hey, we're going to use all of these different things and upending people, because that limits the understandability of what you're trying to do. And then robust. So when we're talking about things like, and we'll look at, again, an example of, closed captioning, say, you might have a great video that is so good on teaching a particular concept, but the person, it might be on a website and it's not on YouTube, which at least has auto closed captioning. But maybe that video does not have closed captioning. Well, now you're locking out some learners. And it might not just be visually impaired students or auditorily impaired students. It may be English speakers for whom, like, the person is talking too fast. I know I talk very fast. And so they want that closed captioning so that they can actually understand what the person is saying. There's so many times on Netflix that I turn on closed captioning because it is just kind of easier for me to understand. So when we're talking about robustness, we want to make sure that we're providing, great to provide that one video, but make sure you're providing other things that are going to help all learners be able to understand the concept that they need to be learning. So in order to do this, we're first going to look at characterizing those ed tech tools. So when we're thinking about strategy, what are the tools that you want to use and what is it you're trying to accomplish? And so it is not about the tool. We don't lead with tools. We lead with strategy. So what are you trying to accomplish? What is the context in which you're working? So thinking about that access and accessibility is really important. And then, okay, what tools can be leveraged to meet the realities of your learners based on the things that you're trying to accomplish? So you may have noticed out of the gate that one of the first things that you had to figure out was, how am I going to maintain, just connect with learners and maintain communication? And I know that most people are using a variety of different tools to do that because of access issues, right? But I know many people started using or increased the use of messaging tools. Why? Well, one, messaging tools are mobile friendly. Two, learners are more familiar with these tools than they are necessarily with something like email, and they're more apt to check it. And so these tools have become very popular because of the fact that they meet the access needs of students. They meet sort of the context that most learners are working in. They're using these types of tools anyway. And so that's been where a lot of people have started. And I'm sure you're familiar with at least one of these, if not all three, but just walking through, WhatsApp is very popular because it is heavily used just in general socially. And so rather than using a new communication tool, some teachers have adopted using WhatsApp because their students were already using it. Remind is one that was designed for classrooms and for teachers. And what's nice about Remind is, in addition to being able to create group chats such as what you do in WhatsApp, you can create classes in Remind, and you can really be managing your communication by creating different messaging threads and different and with different students based on different topics, and tracking that really easily, both on your phone and on the computer. Talking points is one you may not be familiar with. It's actually one that I learned about last summer at COAB, where this is similar to both of these, but it's designed actually for teachers to communicate. The tool itself is designed for teachers to communicate with their parents. And the notion is that we know that a lot of times you may be dealing with parents who don't speak English, and you may have different languages within your classroom. So what Talking Points is a tool that allows me to set the language of the people that I'm communicating with. So in this case, the way it's designed is for me to set all of my parents or students' languages as their native languages. And so I can send a message in English out to my class, and then based on whatever language is set for them, they're going to see the message in their native language. All of the messages have a hyperlink that allows you to see the original message. So I can both see it and say my native language is Spanish. That's how I see the message, but I can click to see the actual thing that was typed by my teacher in English, and then vice versa. So that student can respond to that message in Spanish, and I, as the teacher, can see the message in English, but then I can also see their original message in their native language. And so that is a great communication tool for dealing with multilingual classrooms. The one thing that at least I don't think exists now is everyone is getting their own individual messages. So I don't know if it's designed for, say, group threads, as opposed to me being able to push out a single message to all of my students. I did see a question pop up related to that I want to address. Is Talking Points available offline? It's available if you have cell service. So if you have cell service, you have to be connected somehow, but you don't need to be on Wi-Fi in order to use it. And what's nice about messaging tools in general is obviously there's low bandwidth needed for those messages to go back and forth. So we obviously know that bandwidth and data plans are an issue when we're talking about these various tools. And I'm actually going to sort of make mention of how to be strategic even about that and considering the tools that you use. Early on in the pandemic, we actually created a teacher tools page on the Crowded Learning website. And as I said earlier, Crowded Learning is now part of World Education. We are going to be migrating the site, but we're going to make sure that all of the links sort of stay as is so that there's no disruption for things that you might bookmark. But on this teacher tools page, we organize, these are all freely available resources. So we have communication tools, both for video conferencing. Obviously, we're using WebEx. Now, WebEx is not on here because it's not free. It's not because WebEx is bad or good, but Crowded Learning, sort of all we do are things that are free or have at least some free options available. So here are video conferencing tools. Here are chat and messaging tools. 3 of the ones that I mentioned are on here. There's others as well. And then here are content resources, a number of which we're going to be looking at momentarily. So subject area platforms. These are platforms that are subject specific that allow learners to create accounts, that often allow teachers to create classes, for them to be seeing which lessons students are finishing. Supplemental learning content. So these are resources that don't necessarily have logins, but they have topical sets of content that can be used with learners. So and these are in reading and math and digital literacy and other topics with GCF Learn Free. ESL resources down here. Quizzing and assessment tools. So these are tools that you would use to provide formative opportunities for checking students' understanding. and then tools for managing and sharing. So both learning management system tools that are out there, as well as sort of more nuanced content sharing tools that aren't necessarily designed specifically for education even. In some cases they are, but provide really nice ways for you to organize content with your learners. And of course, actually, go back here. Perfect. And on that page, we also have a template for you to consider which tools you want to use for communication, which tools you want to use for instructional content, and which tools you might want to use for managing content and managing learners. And that's really just designed to help you think of what your plan is for both today in the sort of uncertain setting that we're in, but a lot of it is predominantly remote, I think, for most of you still. And tomorrow, when you're back in person, again, some of these things that you're doing, these practices, they're going to be great when you're back in person. And there's plenty of examples that we've seen over the course of the past 9 months. I'm going to stop here. I don't think there have been any questions. I saw the question that I already answered about talking points. Any other questions up to this point? All right, that is it. So we will move on. One thing to note, and we're going to be doing a distance education strategies session in the near future. But as I mentioned on this previous slide, we have this resource for you to sort of think these things through. It may make sense for you and your organization to sort of coordinate that sort of thinking around what are the tools that we want to use. And so this graphic that I'm showing you is from the Literacy Assistance Center of New York. They provide technical assistance in New York City and beyond for programs. But they did a lot of research on distance learning and remote instruction. And they decided to create sort of this framework called the 7 elements and 3 practices. And so what they've done as an organization is they have made recommendations on the specific tools. These are all instructional tools that folks might or should be using for each of these things based on access. And this is generalized now. So, they can't necessarily, plug into every single learner across all of the organizations that they're working with. But based on that broad view that they have to take, they've selected a specific tool in each of these areas. And so what they're doing is providing how-to videos in each of these things and providing trainings for teachers in each of these things and creating activities that teachers can do and templates for activities that teachers can do in each of these things. So instead of, this continuous, like, oh my gosh, all the shiny things that are flying around, really channeling everyone's efforts so that everyone within, their technical assistance network can be learning together and can be sort of building on their skills. I was talking with Kenneth earlier before this session and just asked, like, what are the things that teachers are asking for? And he had mentioned that people are wanting sort of more advanced Zoom. And so, that's a good thing. Like that those are the things that people are asking for. And so doing it, that would indicate that a lot of organizations are using Zoom, which I know is the case. And so really focusing on, again, that one tool that you want to use and building out both your skills in using that tool and thinking about how to use it strategically is really important. So I really like this model. And as I said earlier, we're going to be hosting a webinar in the near future with these folks to share this model and the support website that they're developing around it. So in terms of now, we're going to switch into learning resources that you want to use. If you are familiar with crowded learning at all, we've been around for about 3 years. And one of the first things that we did, because our mission as an organization was to help increase awareness and use of open education resources within adult education, is we went and polled the field to learn about what are the free and open education resources that adult educators are using with their students. And we have compiled these into a set of 12 skill directories, and they're organized into subject areas. So there are skill directories in academic skill areas. We have skill directories of free resources in workplace competency areas. And then we have skill directories in these 4 lifelong learning competency areas. So digital literacy, financial health, and information literacy, which obviously, as we know from what's been going on, is a really important set of skills. So the skill directories are on the Crowded Learning website, and I'm realizing that the link is not in here. So I'm going to, on the fly, just make sure that I add this for you. On our website, if you go to Explore, we have the skill directories here. So I'm trying to make this, my toolbar go away. It doesn't, there it went away finally. So this is where all of those skill directories reside. And you'll see that we, I'll jump to that information literacy one just because I referenced it. They're all available as PDFs. And then at the top of each one, we actually have this link. So if you want to open this as a Google Doc in your Drive, or to open it as a Google Doc and then save it as a Word doc, and then add whatever you want, you can do that. We're actually going to be reconfiguring these on the EdTech Center site in the coming months. But each one of these has a bunch of different resources. So these are interactive resources in games around information literacy. Here's curriculum and assessment activities, performance assessments around information literacy. Here are news sites and language practice sites that focus on information literacy. And then here are some libraries of instructional resources. So for example, GCF Learn Free has a great video playlist on digital media literacy. So there's a wide range of different resources within each of these things. So again, that's getting at that robust offering, that there's lots of different things that you can be using to develop information literacy. I'll just click on one really quickly, just so that we can think about, well, how would I use like some of these resources with students? So this is factitious. And actually, as you can see here, they continuously update this. So this is, I found this a couple of years ago, but there's actually additional ones. And actually, there's a pandemic edition of this. So that's kind of fun. I'm going to click on that. So the way factitious as a game works is you are trying to tell if something is real news or fake news, and it's designed in a way that's very similar to social media sites that we use. So you swipe left if it's fake, you swipe right if it's real. And so I could be modeling doing this with students. We could read it together, and I could be showing them sort of how to operate it, but then learners could engage with this on their own. It is mobile friendly. And what happens is for each of these, you read it, and there's like hints that are in there to why it would be fake or not fake, but then also you're always looking at the source. So modeling things like looking at the source of the article. Now, I haven't read it, but I know this to be a reliable news source. And so it always says who the source is. It always gives information about why this is a real news story or a fake news story. And it is leveled. So the levels, you saw this was level 1 of 3. It's increasing levels of difficulty. So that's just one of a number of different resources that are on each of these skill directories. And I'm actually, because that question came up, and thank you for catching me on it. Ooh, didn't want to do that. Cancel. I am going to grab this URL just so that I don't forget, and I will hyperlink this right here for you. So there's the link to the skill directories for future use. So that was sort of one of the things we did up front. So now when we're thinking about these different resources that are in these skill directories, and a number of the ones that we recommend for you to use for remote teaching are on that teacher tools page. So if you remember, there was instructional content on that teacher tools page. We pulled the things that are the most comprehensive, the most widely used, and the most readily available for you to be able to find things topically that you want to use with your learners. But when we're thinking about how to leverage those resources with learners, we have to think about what it is, again, we're trying to do. What is our level of involvement going to be in assigning and maybe personalizing these things for students? as well as what supports do learners need in order to navigate the resource, to use the resource effectively. And so we created a matrix, and again, this was sort of in response to COVID, about how to think about what makes sense for me in my context. And so I'm going to pull from what's actually, all of these resources are on that teacher tools page, but these are content resources. And it's thinking about, on the left to right, what level of involvement do you have? So do you want to have something that students can sort of look at on their own, which means low instructor involvement, right? And all I need to do is point them to that resource. Or, do I want to be assigning things and sort of managing like what learners are accessing and when they're learning them? And so that's that sort of left-right matrix. And then there's the up-down matrix here is looking at learner agency. So which of these sites allow for what's called full learner agency, which means they're able to sort of navigate and look through things on their own. And they have the ability, they don't need things to be assigned in order for them to see them. They might not even need accounts in order to use the resource. As long as they know like the topic they want to learn, they can sort of roam free on these websites. And then towards the bottom, we're going to be looking at resources that have limited learner agency. So when I say that, that means that the learner doesn't necessarily have a lot of choice in what they learn. And so when we're looking at the top left-hand side of low instructor involvement and full learner agency, again, this means if you show learners how to use these resources, if you provide, I see a question about that factitious link. It's in the information literacy directory. So I'm gonna make you work for it, I guess. But someone, if you want, can paste the information literacy in the chat. That directory, that would be helpful. So as long as you're orienting students on these tools and helping them understand how to navigate them, and hopefully providing them with a sort of consistent place for them to access it, then you don't really have to be involved beyond sort of getting the learners set up on these sites. And so GCF Learn Free is one that has a wide range of content, heavy focused on digital literacy, which is great. USA Learns is the only one in here that the learner has to actually create an account. But what's nice about that is teachers can also create accounts. Students don't need to be in a class in order to use USA Learns. But say you have a student and you're using USA Learns and they leave your class. They still have access to USA Learns. You can remove them from your class, but they still retain access to learning because it is a site that is designed for learners to be able to self-guide their learning for both English language and citizenship. Learning Chocolate is a great vocabulary resource, which we're going to look at in a second, actually. Reading Skills for Today as Adults is an openly licensed library of resources, which we're also going to look at momentarily. And Math is Fun is another one that has great topical articles on all sorts of math content. So all of these resources, and I think, yeah, all of them are linked in here, allow for learners to sort of look for topics of interest and learn. And the teacher doesn't necessarily need to be involved. Down at the bottom, these are two resources that, again, it's low instructor involvement in terms of as an instructor, I really just need to get the student oriented with the site, and then they can learn on their own. But when we say limited learner agency, what that means is these are tools that learners don't really have a choice in what they're learning. It's prescribed for them because these are personalized learning platforms. So EdReady, which I know is used in Arizona by a few teachers, and I think you might be involved in the NROC community, but EdReady is a diagnostic test at the start where a student takes an assessment, and then they're given sort of a learning plan with the skills that they need to learn. And so it is personalized for them, but they don't necessarily get to self-select the topics that they want to learn. It's personalized because it's going to move them through concepts in a way that makes sense for the things that they need to learn. And all of the resources in there are open education resources. Read Theory is sort of the reading counterpart of that. Read Theory is one where, again, a learner takes a diagnostic test at the beginning, it levels them, and then they can continuously read as much as they want, but they're not necessarily saying, I want to read a story on sports. It's just sort of dishing up readings based on how they are performing on assessments. So both great tools and both great for providing learners with lots of practice that is personalized to their levels, but they don't necessarily have the agency to just sort of learn whatever they want. On the top right now, we're getting into resources that, again, allow for learners to navigate on their own. However, this is sort of, you don't know what you don't know. And so say Khan Academy is the example I use a lot. Khan Academy is the most widely used resource that we've seen within adult education. And I've polled lots of teachers and lots of groups on what free resources are you using. But we always or often hear with Khan Academy that while teachers really like it, it has great class management, it captures time, you can track students' performance. Students don't know where to go in Khan Academy. And so, because it's only organized by grade levels and then high school content areas. So if I'm studying for, say, the GED, or if I'm at TABE level M, what do I do in Khan Academy? I can't connect what it is I'm supposed to learn to what's in Khan Academy. So the teacher really needs to be present in terms of indicating to students what lessons in Khan Academy they should be using. Common Lit is a great reading program. We're going to actually look a little bit at that momentarily. CK12 is great open content, and it's in a multitude of modalities. So there's text-based activities. There are interactivities where students are manipulating things. There's video content that is very similar to Khan Academy. There's study aids, and those are all organized topically for learners. But again, that's great because now a learner has some choice in terms of what they learn and even how they learn it because it's giving them multiple options. So that's great for accessibility as well. But a learner doesn't necessarily know how to set themselves loose and go, yeah, I want to use, I want to learn this topic because, obviously with math, it's understanding how topics relate to one another and how they're leveled. Math Antics is another one that's got great videos that are highly engaging. But again, unless a student really knows what specifically they need to learn, they need that teacher guidance to help them understand what they're doing. And then ReadWorks is sort of not bad because of where it's placed here on this matrix, but it's just know that these are leveled readings that are excellent, but teachers have to assign every reading. And again, the learner is not going to be choosing what it is they're reading. It's all based on teacher assignment. So that's high instructor involvement and low or limited, learner agency. So that's just what they are. So looking at accessibility now, and a couple of those resources that were just shown on that page. Perceivability, if you remember, is the ability for a student to be able to see, hear, or experience what it is they're supposed to learn, regardless of any limitation they may have. And so Math Antics is an example that I find interesting. So Math Antics has a website, and Math Antics puts all of their videos on the YouTube page. So if I go to the Math Antics page here, and I'm going to turn the volume down on it because I know there's feedback. But as I'm hovering over here, I'll even max it out. Now he's talking right now, and again, I've shut the audio off. But I'm looking down here. I've got picture-in-picture and download. Okay, I have the ability to reduce my screen size. I can turn my volume on and off. What do you notice is missing here if we're thinking about the perceivability of all learners being able to understand what's happening in this video right now? It doesn't have captions. So actually, it's kind of helpful that I shut off the audio because if you can't hear, you have no idea what he's saying. And it's very strange. I don't know why they do this on their website, but there's not closed captioning on the website. However, on YouTube, because they put it on YouTube, and we're probably gonna have to sit through this ad here, but you know how YouTube works, but I do want to point out a couple of things here. I'm going to skip the ad. They do have closed captioning on here. So I can turn, it hasn't started talking yet, which is why there are no closed captions. But so now I see the closed captions, but I want to point out a couple of other things that are really helpful for you as a teacher when using video, particularly on YouTube. So one thing is in terms of that understandability, I'll just turn it on quickly here.
Why do I need rules to tell me which operations to do first? Can't I just do them in any order I want?
So like me, this guy talks kind of fast. I know that. I'm aware of that with myself. Within closed captioning, you have the ability not only to change the language of the subtitles, so it's auto-translate, so it's not perfect, but at least it's getting to higher levels of understandability for someone whose English might be limited. You also have the ability to adjust the playback speed. So I can slow him down, which you could do with me.
That's a really good question. And to answer it, we're going to give two totally different.
So it slows down the speed of the audio, so it's a little bit more understandable. So because we're on YouTube and viewing it in this player with these tools, this video is now perceivable to more learners and understandable to more learners as well, because of the closed captioning and because of the ability to reduce the speed. I also want to point out that with any video on YouTube that has closed captioning, you can open the transcript. And I point that out because from a teaching perspective or from a review perspective, this allows you to scroll through the transcripts. And so I remember there was that example that he gave, where is it? I can just scroll through the captions and find it. And it's going to bring me direct to that point of the lesson where it is. So maybe you also remember, like, oh, in this video, he said, I'm trying to find something that's unique. Aha. So I can use the find feature, so Control F and go aha. And it's going to find that specific thing in the transcript. And again, I can point to it. So it's just helpful for you if you're trying to sort of go back into a video, and for students that you have the ability to actually open the full transcript from that video, as opposed to just watching it in real time as you're working. So that's perceivability in thinking of those resources that we just showed. Learning Chocolate was another resource that I showed, and that was in the top left. This is a language learning platform. And so it is, it has all these different categories that students can self-explore. I've seen this used very well in a lot of centers. I don't know why I have this like thing floating in the way. Here in Chicago, so a lot of English language learning programs I have seen use Learning Chocolate very successfully, because they have all sorts of great resources. I know IET is a focus for many states right now. And so these are all of these vocabulary sets and language learning sets around jobs. So you can see there's factory jobs and factory equipment, and retail jobs and retail equipment, and restaurant jobs and restaurant job duties. So lots of great learning sets for vocabulary. And I'm gonna open one up in a second. So I'm gonna hop into this one, which is on computers, so basic computers. Now, one thing you'll see, there's lots of ads. This is kind of a lot for a learner, but I've seen, once you sort of orient students to this website, in computer labs, I've seen students just open up, find what they want to learn, or maybe they've been assigned what they're supposed to learn, and then they can just click on this, and it opens it up. It gets rid of all those ads. This is beautiful. It's taking up all my screen, and what's nice about it is I learn these words, and then there's a series of matching activities.
CPU.
So this is focusing on listening and reading. This one is not listening at all. This is focused solely on reading and identifying. Then you have one that is the audio to the thing. So no reading, but hearing the word and matching it to the picture. So it goes through all of those modalities for every single one of them. Then there's a fill-in, and then there's a dictation. I would show the dictation, but my little toolbar has gotten in the way. Here it is. So they hear the word
Motherboard.
and then they type it. So it's very consistent. Remember that understandable. If you're using this routinely, this is a consistent experience for students. So it is very understandable for students. One of the problems with it, however, is look at what it looks like on a phone. So I have to sort of slide left and right on my mobile device in order to see everything. You can see there's things cut off over here and like labels that aren't even present down here. If I flip it the other way, the words here at the bottom don't show up on screen. So now I have to like scroll up in order to see the words, and then say I wanted to do my CPU, which I think is this one right here. Now that label's not on my screen. So I have to like grab CPU and then like scroll it up and then hope it jumps on. So while it can be viewed on a mobile device, it isn't necessarily operable on a mobile device. And so it's a great resource. You would not want to shy away from using that resource, but you want to think, can my learners use this resource effectively based on what they have? And again, I've seen learners using it in a computer lab, which is great. But that learner in the computer lab might also have tactile issues and not be able to, say, operate a mouse. And so a touch screen might be better. So if they're on a tablet, actually, these are great because it's a larger screen size, so they are able to be operated. But you might want to provide an alternate option using a tool like Quizlet. And I really love Quizlet because, as you saw there, it's very operable on a mobile device. It's very mobile friendly, but then it's also very operable on a computer. So my hands are off the mouse right now. Quizlet has keyboard commands, so all I need to do is press the space bar for it to flip the card and hit my arrow key in order to advance to the next one. And if I open it and then if I use my tabs, it actually allows me to click through all of the various options here very easily. So it's really designed for being able to operate with keyboard commands. And then if I hit enter, it's actually going to play the audio. So it's got just a set of a few keyboard commands that allows this to, again, be understandable, but also allows it to be operable for someone who might have tactile issues. And so this is just when we're thinking about all these resources, we want to create routines. We want to use resources, definitely like Learning Chocolate, because there's so much great content and we can use it for a number of different topics that we want to teach. We just also want to consider that on that access and accessibility issues, if learners don't have the right devices, or if they aren't able to operate it in the way that is intended, then you need to be providing other options for them. I'm just going to stop here to see if there's any questions in the chat. I think there are math terms in Learning Chocolate. There are phonics. So there's great sets of phonics resources for learning vowel sounds, learning consonant blends, and things like that. Students can create flashcard sets in Quizlet. They cannot create flashcard sets in Learning Chocolate, but I think anybody can actually submit sets of words that they want to have added to Learning Chocolate. I'm just scrolling up. If you embed a YouTube video onto your website or into an LMS, all of those tools are available to students. And then when you embed a YouTube video, you can always launch the video in YouTube, and then you have it. Perfect. Okay, I think that answered all of those questions.
Here's a couple that were missed earlier.
Oh, sorry. Go for it, Kenneth.
Katie Brown asks, is the skill directory searchable? Oh, you're muted.
Sorry. Yeah. The skill directory is not searchable. It's all individual PDFs. That is one of the things that we're going to be updating as we migrate these things over to WorldNet. I recognize that we want sort of the ability to filter based on content, based on resource type. So we're going to be retooling that in the coming months.
And then Blanca Garcia asks, oh, she put it in the chat.
Oh, perfect. Thank you. Whoa, that's a lot. Okay. Information. Oh, sorry. Can you access and use the crowded resources in a class on the Zoom platform? So that's for you to sort of check, right? You want to look at these resources and see how friendly or not friendly it is within Zoom. So it's a wide range. So just know, none of those resources are actually ours. Like that we are compiling various great things that we've seen that educators are using. I am going to show you a couple actually right now. I'm going to show you some things that we have created. Yeah, those come from all sorts of different places. So again, that's going to be one that we do. I'm reading this other one. Sorry, visual information and conflict process in the brain is not. This is diving into theory, and we have limited time, so I appreciate that question. If people want to address and talk through Robert's question, that would be great. I don't have necessary thoughts right now because I also know we have a lot of content to cover in 8 minutes, so I'm going to move on. Sorry about that. So thinking about this sort of providing robust opportunities, one of the things that we did was work with an organization or a community college, Appalachian State University. They had developed a great vocabulary resource. It's a Word document, so it's printed. That's awesome. And so you can use it in class. You could hand it out as a packet for students, and they can use these resources and go through these activities. But what we decided to do was work with them to develop Quizlet study sets. Again, very operable for students on mobile devices, very accessible. And it allows for just one more modality and a variety of different study modes for them to engage with these vocabulary words in ways that make sense. But then it was sort of like, okay, we have these worksheets that are on your website and Crowded Learning on our website. We have these Quizlets. And so we decided to engage with them again and say, hey, do you mind if we retool your worksheets, your activity sets, and add a QR code so that a student can have that paper version of the activities, but then they could just use their mobile device, scan it, and then they have access to a interactive version or interactive activities that use those words. The other thing that we did was when I was talking to them, to teachers about this great resource that they have, teachers, they were Word docs, and so they were trying to assign it in Google Classroom. And they couldn't because it wasn't sort of designed for Google Classroom. It was in Microsoft Word. And so even though you can see a Word doc in a Google Drive, it doesn't do what Google Classroom does great, which is create copies for every student. So we also converted them to Google Docs. And so now these can be assigned directly in Google Classroom. And then we've also added, if they're using the Google Doc, so if they're operating it on a computer, they have the link that will access the Quizlet. They can use the Quizlet. But even if they have the hard copy, they also have the QR code, and so they can access the Quizlet in both ways. So nobody is shut out from any of the activities, regardless of how they're engaging with that activity set. And so that's what's really important when we're thinking about open education resources, is how to limit barriers for learners. I'm going to fly through a few resources here, but I just want to make mention of things that are available for online and offline use because access is kind of a big deal. Common Core Sheets is a great resource. We have done alignments of all of their worksheets for to the standards, the college and career readiness standards. So there's over 5,000 worksheets and more, because you can customize them, that we've provided on our website. This is hyperlinked here. And this allows you to grab those worksheets and to be able to print them and share them with students. They also, on the online site, they do have interactive practice and they have flashcards that you can print out, but they've also added, oh, really? Sorry, I gotta escape out of here. My one of my toolbars is blocking the very link that I need. They have added a distance learning button on all of their resources since the pandemic. And it's very basic, but kind of cool as well. So I have the ability to set the number of problems I want and set the number of times I want students to be able to answer. And then I can create a distance learning assignment. And I'll share this in the chat with you if you want to just check it out. But this actually allows me to share this link out with students. They can all do it on their own. It actually, I don't even need an account. It actually saves it to my cookies. So like, as long as I'm using the same computer, I don't even have to create an account. It's just going to save it. But you might want to create an account because the second you clear your cookies, they'll go away. But I can see how long students spent on every problem. I can see how they did on each problem, just like any other learning management system. And basically, students have interactive practice. Someone's going to need to be muted. Sorry, I'm hearing some feedback on my speaker. But that's something new that they added. So you'll see the link in the chat if you want to check out how that works for a student. I will say that as good as that is, There are some limitations because of all the ads in there in terms of making it operable. All right, we are shrinking on my time window, so I'm going to fly through a few resources that if you've heard me talk before, you've probably heard of these things. So leveling and providing resources for all different levels is important. Common Lit is my favorite reading tool for that because it allows you to search by all sorts of different topical areas and themes. We have provided alignments on the Crowded Learning website to the College and Career Readiness Standard domains and Lexile levels. So you can see here how many readings are available at each of these domains and at each of these Lexile ranges for the CCRS and TABE levels. So if you click on that image, it'll open that up. But all of these, again, are available as downloadable. So if students don't have access, this has the text and the questions. The online is sensational, though. It has guided reading modes where it's read aloud. They're asked questions throughout the text formatively. And it provides paired text. So if you have learners at different levels, they can still be reading on a specific topic. There's also lots of guiding questions. You can track the guiding questions, You can also track learner performance on the comprehension questions at the end. Read theory I mentioned earlier, and I'm going to skip over all of these, but this is the one where you can set students up, they take a diagnostic, and then they work through it on their own. And so it levels up and down based on how they've done. So I'm going to click through all of these real quickly. But one of the things that I like about that is even though they're working independently, you can have them in your class and you can see their Lexile progression. You can also see their performance against the standards. So in the sequence of slides that we just blew through, I got 2 questions wrong. They both were in key idea and details. And so it tracks that at the domain level for me. And so it provides really nice diagnostic for teachers to be able to look in. Skill Blocks is a tool that I've talked about before, but Skill Blocks allows you to create skill-based learning playlists for students based on math concepts. And we have a set of tutorial videos for you to learn how to use it. But what's great about Skill Blocks is this provides that robust concept of providing lots of different resources on a specific topic. So these are all on ratio and proportion. And so learners get choice in terms of how they're engaging with content. And so you have the ability to, we're looking to the College and Career Readiness Standards, that question, the adult ed standards, not the K-12 standards. So we have a lot of teachers that are sharing these skill box playlists as is. So they're just offering them as a set of resources for students to explore. We also have teachers that are just finding activities and then copying the links for them and then assigning those specific activities in the tools of choice. We're literally at time, and this is poor planning on my point, but I'm going to take 3 more minutes to go through the organization piece because this is really important. So if you can stay, great. If you can't, what's that?
You're good to go. We got to go for the next session.
Awesome. So in terms of organization, because I think this is really important, because if we're talking about using all these different resources, we want to make sure that students know where to go, when to go, and how to use it once they're there. And so thinking about the tools that you're using is really important and being consistent in the nature that you're providing it. I am a huge fan of Wakelet. Wakelet is a tool that allows you to curate content for learners and put them into what are called collections. So we have teachers that have taken the resources that they find in Skill Blocks that is just like a playlist, and they've been constructing lessons in Wakelet where they're organizing them into these are resources that help you learn. These are games that go with this concept. And then these are assessments that you can do. And what's nice is once I, as a teacher, create this one Wakelet, I can share it with all of you. And then you have those same resources available for your learners and the ability to adjust it as you see fit or share it as is. And so one organization, these are all different Wakelet lessons that I've created that you can explore. But one organization in South Carolina, they've been sort of coordinating the development of these Wakelets. And so first, they created 200 skill blocks that are available for anybody based on their curriculum at all levels of the College and Career Readiness Standards. They're a TABE state, so they have TABE level E, M, D, and A skill block sets, over 200. And then they started creating these wakelets, and they're sharing them out within their region with assessments that they're building in so that they can track how learners are performing. They actually are assigning proxy hours to each one of those wakelet lessons. So they've literally in the past 9 months just been very coordinated from the start. And now they have all of these distance learning resources that they have created, that they have shared out with all teachers within the state, and that teachers have the ability to adjust as they see fit. And so, again, consistent sort of setup and format, and also providing them in a way that anyone can adjust them to meet the needs of their learners. We, if you came to any of my sessions in the fall, we, Crowded Learning, created an app with Florida Literacy Coalition. Remember that challenge that I said about Khan Academy is great, but where do I go? Florida Literacy Coalition had organized Khan Academy videos to the GED test. And we took it one step further and worked with them to develop an app. And so now this is a learner-facing app that they can go into the topics that they need to study. They can find the videos. The videos are the YouTube versions, but they can launch into Khan Academy if they're using Khan Academy to get credit. So it might just be a tool for finding the right video in Khan Academy and then jumping into Khan Academy. Or they might use this as where they're actually watching the videos, and then they have the ability to track their own completion. We also worked with teachers, a few of who are on this call today. I think Lilybeth and Dr. Tasha Nelson are on this call. But we worked with teachers to take reading content and organize it into a full website of resources on our Crowded Learning site called the Marshall Leveled Reading Program. And so we used open resources, the original reading skills for today's adults, and we organized all of these resources into Wakelet libraries. So instead of it just being the story, we created a Quizlet that has a vocabulary practice, and we created a Google Form quiz that had comprehension check for each story, and we put each of them into a Wakelet. And so if I go here, these are all teacher-created resources, which is awesome, but we basically did this coordination. And so now all of these are shareable with your students. Every single one has vocabulary practice, the story, and a Google Form. It's consistent. They cover a wide range of topics and all sorts of different levels. So this spans all of the levels of the college and career readiness standards. Crowded Learning went one step further and took all the things that teachers had created, and we built it into a free app. And so learners can explore by these topics. There's about 20 topics, and then by level as well. And again, all self-guided, but it's consistent presentation of these resources, which is so important when you're dealing with open education resources. And you have the ability to actually copy all of those resources. So we provide a spreadsheet that has all of these are all the teacher-created forms, Quizlets, and Wakelets, so that you can use them as they are. You can copy them to your own accounts, adjust them as you wish. And that's just part of thinking about how you use these. Sharing is really important too. Many of you may be using Google Classroom. Yeah, we're hitting over, so I'm gonna close with this. All of these things are linked in the slides. And if they're not, I'll groom through again and find them. You may wish to organize things in Google Classroom. I use the resources. I create a tab in my Google Classroom where all of the resources that students need. So it's always in the same place for them to use. So if you have these websites or these Wakelet sites that what I just showed you that you want them to go to, putting those in one consistent place that they know to go to, you can do that in any LMS, including Google Classroom. You could also create a class website. These are Learning Chocolate study sets that are all on technology. And we've organized them into computer basics, internet, email, word processing, and mobile applications. So again, students are going to have the same experience for every single one of these things. Once they know how to use Learning Chocolate, they know where to go, and they can pick whatever topic that they want to learn on that day. And then one other thing in terms of organizing students, a lot of these websites, they might not have an app, but teaching students how to add things to their home screen allows you to take something that you want them to use repeatedly, like Read Theory, which does not have an app, but its mobile version is great. It works just fine. So while they don't have an app, you can teach them to add it to their home screen. And then it sort of looks and feels like an app because they will just launch it and they'll be going to the same place. So if there are things that you're using frequently with students, teaching them how to do that will be really important because then it's on their device and then they can jump into that resource whenever they want. Then this is just the last thing I'm going to show. I love these. These are digital virtual classrooms. So these are very creative teachers who have created a space that is just sort of familiar, right? It looks like a classroom. And in this case, I can click on the cat. There's actually has meditation videos. So if students want to calm down, they can go here, but I can get to GED resources. I can get to health resources here. In this case, this teacher has created a virtual library. So she created a bookshelf has links to these different stories and then has a link to a Google form here. These are all both links, so you can click on these and access them. So she has a reading record in Google Forms. So students can go to any reading they want to, and then just anytime they finish a reading, they fill out that form and answer a couple questions about their reading. So they're creating a sort of familiar space for learners using open resources, organizing it in a way that sort of makes sense to us sort of visually, right? But then they're also giving the affordances to be able to launch in ways that make sense. I actually have to go because I have another webinar, but there are additional things in here talking about strategies. I wish I had more than an hour, I always do. But I hope you found these resources helpful. I'm going to go through all of these to make certain that they are available as links, because I know I promised you that, and I saw some questions about where the link is, so that makes me think that maybe I didn't link some resources. So make sure you make a copy of this presentation, and I will be adding later today any missing links. But thank you for your time. I hope you enjoy your day and it's full of learning, and good luck with this journey that we are all on in terms of distance education. Thanks so much.